Now to an unprecedented move. The United States and its NATO allies have decided to expel Russian diplomats from their countries. The United States and 17 other countries have now decided to expel scores of Russian diplomats in response to the alleged nerve agent attack in the United Kingdom. It's a story that's developing very fast and spreading across the world. The US has ordered the expulsion of 60 diplomats. Germany, France and Poland have expelled 4 diplomats each who were allegedly operating as spies. Lithuania will expel 3 Russian diplomats and ban the entry of 44 other Russians. Ukraine will ask 13 Russian diplomats to leave the country. The US government says that out of the 60 expelled, 12 have been identified as intelligence officers who were stationed at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The Trump administration has also ordered Moscow to shut their consulate in Seattle because of its proximity to an American naval base. The expelled diplomats have been given 7 days to leave. This is the toughest diplomatic retaliation by US government since 1986, when the then President Ronald Reagan ordered the expulsion of 55 Russian diplomats from the country. And Russia has hit back at the US and EU action. It has described it as provocative. The Russian envoy to the US has said that Washington's understands nothing but force. The UK, meanwhile, has expectedly welcomed the move. The British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson tweeted, and I quote, "Today's extraordinary international response by our allies stands in history as the largest collective expulsion of Russian intelligence officers ever and will help defend our shared security. Russia cannot break international rules with impunity." From Washington is WION correspondent Nina Maria Potts. Good evening, Nina. This was an expected line, would you say, despite the president's silence on this spy poisoning case?
Well, in its strongest statement yet, I would say, in an unprecedented move, as you say, the US has announced that it will be expelling in total 60 Russian diplomats, officials who are working currently in the United States in solidarity with the UK. We were warned by the State Department sometime last week that there would be actions moving forward in coordination with the European Union. We've just heard that it's in fact 14 EU countries that are planning to take action and carry out similar expulsions. In the statement, the US says that it's going to be expelling 48 Russian officials currently serving at the bilateral mission to the United States. They're also demanding that Russia closes its consulate general in Seattle, as you rightly mentioned, giving them until April the 2nd. So, in fact, only 7 days to shut down operations. And they've targeted the consulate general in Seattle because of its proximity to a submarine base. And you rightly mentioned that they will also be expelling 12 intelligence operatives from the Russian mission to the United Nations. The US is saying that those officials have abused their privileged status in the United States. This move, as you rightly said, coming on the back of the tit-for-tat between the UK and Russia on the expulsion of 23 diplomats on both sides. A strong sign of solidarity. President Trump did indicate earlier this month that he was going to point the finger of blame at Moscow for targeting and carrying out this chemical weapons attack on this Russian spy in the United Kingdom. And finally, I think the US taking some action, although from the State Department we're also hearing a strong line that they are going out to defend their record on imposing new sanctions on Russia, pointing to the sanctions that they issued over Russia's involvement in Ukraine. So definitely a beefing up, I would say, in the United States response.
Also with us from Moscow is WION's correspondent Dan Ashby. Good evening, Dan. Moscow has come up with a response on expected lines that they are going to retaliate. They will see it as provocation. But how many countries will Russia retaliate against?
Well, that is the question. They would, of course, have to expel even more diplomats after expelling the 23 UK diplomats in the first place. But no surprise there. President Putin's spokesman coming out today and saying that they would expect to mirror these expulsions from the US, at least, and following their long-held policy of reciprocity. But then in the last few hours, we've had a strong statement from the Foreign Ministry here saying this is a provocative gesture and a continuation of a confrontational line, that this Euro-Atlantic unity goes in the face of common sense. So more words of frustration, and the Foreign Ministry spokesman goes on to say, this will not go unnoticed and we will take action. So yes, you can expect Moscow to have reciprocity to expel diplomats, but whether it will escalate further remains to be seen.
Dan, President Donald Trump hasn't taken a very tough line himself, yet his administration cannot be acting without his consent. How does this impact the personal equation between him and Vladimir Putin?
Well, look, this will be a blow to the Kremlin. They did not want this to escalate further than the United Kingdom. This is the year when they're hosting the World Cup. The focus is supposed to be on Russia's positive role in the world, the different projects it's doing. So it wanted this to be over with. After President Putin won the election, he came out and made some fairly dovish comments saying that he wanted positive relations with other countries. He didn't want some sort of arm race. We know that he has tried to have a positive relationship with the American administration, although recently Kremlin officials have said that it's America that's letting Russia down. So this escalation of diplomatic expulsions will be a headache for Russia ahead of what is a big year for the country.
Right, Dan Ashby, thanks very much. And let me also thank Nina Maria Potts for joining us from Washington. This is a developing story. The question we're asking now is a question perhaps that many of you following this would be asking. What's the point of this exercise beyond the symbolism? What happens considering the fact that ambassadors from both sides continue to be serving in those countries? So this is not a break in diplomatic ties, really. This is just sending out a tough message. Why do countries expel diplomats? While diplomats around the world are granted immunity in their host country, their rights to stay can be withdrawn if they break the law, they upset the host nation, or in the event of diplomatic tension like what we're seeing between the UK and Russia right now. Under Article 9 of the Vienna Convention, the host country can at any point in time and for any reason declare a person to be persona non grata, which means that they are not welcome in that country. So who decides who goes? The host government decides which diplomats would go. The countries can summon the ambassador, issue a formal note. There is no law governing how that should be done. In the past, President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, for instance, announced the expulsion of American ambassador on national television. That is, if he were in today's day and age, he would be doing it on Twitter, perhaps. What next for the expelled envoys? Diplomats are expected to leave after the host country issues the order. Refusing to leave is a breach of international treaties and could lead to a major crisis. While Russia gave the UK 1 week for its diplomats to leave, the time can be as less as 24 hours. In the 1960s, a British insurance firm offered a policy to protect diplomats against sudden expulsion from Moscow. There is no Foreign Office guideline to its staff on what to do in case they are expelled. So can these diplomats who've been expelled from a country go back to that country? It's very rare for a person to return to a host country after being declared persona non grata. Most of the expelled diplomats are generally reassigned after they return. But this, of course, makes for very big headlines. 17 countries and counting expelling Russian diplomats. Russia is calling it a provocation and is going to retaliate. Is this the second Cold War? That's a question that many are asking. When former US President Barack Obama met Xi Jinping in the White House in September 2015, he reportedly raised the theft of 22 million security dossiers of Americans from the computers of the US government. The dossiers were stolen in an audacious attack by Chinese cyber hackers. It's not clear what Xi Jinping's response was, if any. But if the latest report of the US Trade Representative is any indication, Xi Jinping may have done nothing to clean up China's act. The 215-page report says, and I'm quoting, the Chinese government has conducted and supported cyber incursions into American commercial networks targeting confidential business information held by US firms. This report says that China's cyber attacks are one of 4 unfair trading practices. These attacks are linked to strategic objectives. Cyber espionage targets technical data and negotiating positions. It also targets sensitive internal communication. Cyber theft, according to this report, is China's preferred method of collecting information. Cyber espionage gives China plausible deniability. All of it is very believable. This was one of the reasons behind President Donald Trump's decision to impose tariffs on Chinese products. According to the Trade Representative's report, the theft is largely the work of the 3rd Department of the People's Liberation Army Unit 61398. What is this unit? It is China's cyber army. Its existence has been known since 2013. This unit is located in Shanghai. It is staffed by thousands of cyber technicians. This 3rd department, as it's called, has stolen data from 141 organizations. These are the ones we know about. There might be many more. These organizations cover aerospace, IT, satellites and telecom. This very unit targeted Westinghouse Electric and stole 700,000 pages of data. Some of this data was related to technical and design specifications, and it happened at a time when this company was building 4 nuclear reactors in China. The report says that China has fused the activities of science and technology entities with that of the military. Everything in China is about the military. It says, it goes on to say more about what this unit does. One example of such fusion is the China Offshore National Oil Corporation. It is a state-owned company. It asked Chinese intelligence services to gather information and data on US shale gas technology. Obviously, it's not fair competition. This has no parallel with American cyber practices, which are tempered by market forces. China's cyber espionage is entirely state-driven. The obvious question then is India immune? Perish the thought. In March 2009, a Canadian research team published a study of the GhostNet cyber espionage network. It targeted 1,300 entities, including the Indian and German embassies around the world and the Tibetan government in exile here in India. The same group hacked into the systems of the Philippine Foreign Ministry, the German Foreign Office, the Australian Prime Minister's office. The Chinese are the main suspects. Of course, they denied it. In January 2010, India's then National Security Advisor M.K. Narayanan said that his office and other government departments were targeted with a Trojan virus. It allowed a hacker suspected to be Chinese to remotely access a computer and download or delete files. This virus was detected and all the staff were told not to log on to it until it had been eliminated. Similar attacks have been reported on computers of India's External Affairs Ministry, the Home Ministry of India, Defence Ministry. Their networks were accessed through the communication systems supporting these networks. So how secure are India's digital networks from cyber attacks? This is hard to assess for those on the outside. What's clear is that there is greater awareness of cyber espionage. Witness the controversy over Aadhaar details being distributed by unscrupulous agencies. This is a big debate getting only bigger by the day. But it's not just technology where China is needling India. It's territory as well. Provoking India once again, China has said that Doklam belongs to it. The same old song. The reaction comes just a day after Indian Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, in an interview to a Chinese daily, spoke about this issue. China stepped up its rhetoric against India in a point-by-point rebuttal. In the interview, the ambassador said that China's attempt at altering the status quo in the region led to the standoff. Beijing has claimed that its activities in the region were within the sovereign rights and that there is no such thing as status quo or changing status quo. The Indian envoy had also warned that any attempt to change the status quo on the border would lead to a situation similar to Doklam. What did the Chinese say? They said India should have learnt its lessons from the standoff.
我们希望印方呢汲取教训，恪守戒约和国际关系的基本准则，与中方一道维护好边境地区的和平稳定，为两国关系的积极发展创造良好的氛围。关于这个谈判来划定边界的问题，那么中方在这个中印边界问题上的立场呢，也是非常一贯和明确的。中印边界的东段、西段、中段都从来没有正式的划定，中方呢是致力于通过谈判解决领土争议。目前，中印两国正在探讨通过谈判来解决双方的领土争议问题，寻求公平合理和双方都能接受的解决方案。我们认为，在边界的问题最终解决之前呢，双方应该做出共同努力，来维护好边境地区的和平与安宁。
That's just the tip of the iceberg, as some say. Chinese choppers today intruded Indian airspace along the Indo-China border in Uttarakhand's Barahoti amid heightened security concerns. This is the fourth such act in a month. Reports suggest that the Chinese chopper may have taken aerial photographs of Indian troops working on the ground. The Indian Air Force is investigating the matter. Barahoti, we can tell you, is one of the 3 border posts in the sector where the ITBP, the Indo-Tibetan Border Police, are not allowed to carry weapons and are in civilian clothes under a unilateral decision by the Indian government in June 2000. In 1958, India and China had listed Barahoti, an 80 square kilometer sloping pasture, as a disputed area where neither side could send their troops.